No Utopia. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Well, our subject today is brought to us from the recent news that anarchists have taken over a 6 square block area of Seattle and given it the name CHAZ. It's an acronym for Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, 6 blocks in downtown Seattle, which they have taken over and trying to create a utopia. Sorry if I laugh about this. People have tried this many, many times over history, and it never works out. Here's how us Christian economists see it. The first observation we make is you have to have a way to produce and distribute goods. Chaz does not have that. So what's in the news today is a handwritten list of items they need. Why? Well, because they can't produce and distribute them. They have no economic system. They're calling on people to give them these things for some reason. Well, somebody has to make and produce them. They don't have a system for doing so. And so on the list are things like clothing and cigarettes, a necessity, I guess, ice, Gatorade, those food. See, that's the interesting thing. You have to have an economic system. Chaz has been set up as a utopia, as a Capitol Hill autonomous zone, meaning you can do as you wish, but there's no rules for economic distribution, so it's not going to work. Second is governance. Here's the interesting thing. They had some food, but as the media reported, the homeless people in the area ate their food, so they didn't have any more. This is a governance problem, right? So one of the most important things you establish in any society is private property. Who owns things? If nobody owns the food, anybody can eat it, and you have no control system. And in the news today, there's even news that they're setting up a garbage system. Well, doesn't this sound like a governance system? Let me take you back 50 years. I was a freshman at Brandon Valley High School in South Dakota and must have been in the wrong study hall because they were having a guest speaker for the seniors who's a lawyer. And he asks, okay, you get stranded on an island. What's the first thing you do? One smart student says, find some food. Good point. Second point, how do you distribute the food? What he was getting to was you have to have some kind of a governance system. See, all societies have had to figure this out. You have to have a governance system. You cannot have an autonomous zone where people do as they wish. And this is what they found out in Chaz in about 48 hours. Somebody ate their food. You have to just to collect the garbage. Well, this is what cities and towns and municipalities do. You can't function without them. Sorry if I'm laughing. But the third thing, and the most important perhaps for us as Christian economists, is these people are expressing their worldview. Now, you may not see any religion taking place, but you do see worldview. And the biggest difference between the people who are trying to run Chaz in Seattle and the Christians is they do not believe in the fallen nature. Their idea is that you can have a system without police. Well, that would assume that people are born with a positive nature to do good, and that you have to force them to do bad. In the Christian worldview, we think the opposite. Matter of fact, anybody who's raised kids knows this. I mean, isn't it really obvious? Did you have to teach your kid to take the truck away from his playmate and hit him over the head with it? No, he knew that. Coming out of the womb, he knew that's what he wanted to do. You had to teach him to share. Isn't it absurd to think that it would be natural for kids to share, but unnatural for them to hit the other kid over the head with a truck? Come on, this is too obvious. This is the way the world is. The world is fallen. How do we overcome the fallen nature and how do we deal with the fallen nature is the biggest issue of Christian economics. In a fallen world, how do we produce and distribute goods? Chaz is giving us kind of a humorous example of what happens when you do not assume the fallen nature. And look, this is not without precedent. I was visiting in Copenhagen, this place called Christiana. It's much like Chaz. In 1971, these hippies took over an island in Copenhagen that used to be a military institute. They took it over and the government said, okay, you can have it. Have a good time. Here's the interesting thing. I took a picture of this. This is a poster that's quite a few different places in Christiana. Here's what it says. Christiana's commitment is to create and sustain a self-governing community in which everyone is free to develop and express themselves as responsible members of the community. That's the small part of the poster. Now there's 9 elements, 9 rules for Christiana. Are you getting it? Are you getting it, folks? You can't have any society without rules. And these rules are interesting because the one thing these hippies wanted was the ability to use marijuana. Okay, well, they got that ability and they can still do it. But look at rule number 2, no hard drugs. Really? If you look at the history, it's fascinating. Drug dealers found out, oh, I can sell drugs with great immunity without any with no police. And so the drug dealers moved in. Drug dealers like a monopoly. And so they forced out the others and you had all this violence. So look at this. They created this community so they could have drugs. But what's rule number 2? No hard drugs. What's rule number 1? No weapons. Oh, okay. I thought this was free. I thought it was autonomous. I thought you could express yourself and live your life as you wish. I'm only to number 2. Number 3 is no violence. Number 4 is no private cars. Number 5 is no bikers' colors, meaning gang type apparel, right? So this, I'm sorry if I'm laughing, but this is so obvious. They created Christiana in Copenhagen so you could be free to do as you wish. They're telling you how to dress. I mean, it's too obvious. Rule number 6, no bulletproof clothing. No sale of fireworks. No use of thunder flashes, which by the diagram looks like a large firework. Halfway between a firework and dynamite, I don't know. And number 9 is no stolen goods. Hey, but other than these 9 things, you are free to express yourself and do as you wish. Sorry if I'm laughing. It just never works. Look, you can't have a society without an economic system to distribute goods, a governance system which tells you who owns private property and how to behave yourself. Third, these are wrapped in a Christian worldview, or in a worldview, I should say. These 3 things. Matter of fact, when I teach international business, we got this really simple 2-dimensional diagram. On the vertical is economics, from free to constrained. On the horizontal is political, from free to constrained. That's it. I mean, those 2 things, you can plot every country. I don't want to get into the details. This could go on for a long time. But that's it. And so whether it's the United States or Christiana or Chaz, you have to have some type of an economic system, some type of a governance system, and that is created by a worldview. These 3 things, that's it. Yeah. Sometimes in worldview, we'll call this sphere sovereignty. And what we mean by that is we believe that God has these spheres of our lives that he has ordained, and it's for us to figure out how do we keep these spheres going, meaning an economic sphere, meaning a governance sphere. There's many other things. Those are the 2 I'm talking about today. But families and communities and all these kinds of things. What did God have in mind? And we're continually trying to figure this out. So what has happened in Chaz is they have said, the police made some mistakes, so we will do away with the police. I mean, sorry to use this hackneyed old phrase, but that's the idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Of course, there are some bad police, but you don't do away with the police system because you know what? What you produce is going to be pretty close to that already. It hasn't been 48 hours. And there's a picture actually in today's news of this guy guarding Chaz, and he has a semi-automatic rifle. These are people who created a zone without police, and he has a semi-automatic rifle. Wait, sorry, okay. Look, so these spheres, as we call them in Christian worldview, we tend to think that God wants us to have those spheres, and as poor humans, we're always trying to figure out what did God have in mind, but some of these things are rather obvious. So so if something happened in a university that was wrong, and you destroyed all universities, hey, in a few years, something would emerge that looks pretty much like a university. A lot of people die in hospitals. If you said, we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, we have to do away with hospitals, hey, in a few years, something would emerge that looks pretty much like a hospital. If you said we had to do away with automobiles because 32,000 people die in automobile accidents every year, you could outlaw them. In a few years, something would emerge that looks pretty much like an automobile. Same thing with police, which is going on now. Some policemen did bad things, no question. If you throw the baby out with the bathwater and you destroy the police system, in some time, pretty quickly actually, something will emerge that looks pretty much like a police system. In Chaz, it took 48 hours for the guy to be standing at the entrance holding a semi-automatic rifle. Look, we think God designed these systems, and it's up to us as humans to try to figure out how do we enact them and how do we bring them about? How do we change and progressively move them ahead so they're better? I covered this a lot in episode number 13, which I terribly mistitled No Crash Diets, because I did it the first of the year in January where people on crash diets. It really should have been titled Why Christians Are Conservative. It is drawn from the book The Great Debate by Yuval Levin, in which he talks about the debate between Edmund Burke and Thomas Paine, both who favored the U.S. Revolution, but then in the French Revolution, Edmund Burke said that was a bad idea. Thomas Paine favored the French Revolution. The reason that book, The Great Debate, comes to mind today in Chaz is Edmund Burke said, look, you reform systems and you change them and you make them better. There's no need for a revolution as there was in France. Essentially, they threw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to have a reason for a revolution, Edmund Burke would say. And Thomas Paine would say, no, all revolutions are good just because they destroy the past. See, we as Christians believe these people who made these systems, universities, hospitals, automobiles, police, we believe that there was some good in there, right? It was not all bad. There's some good and there's some bad mixed in with it. And we as Christians are trying to prayerfully figure out what is the good that we sustain and what is the bad that we get rid of. Yeah, and I return to this phrase by Alex Haley, author of Roots, which I use so often. Find the good and praise it. That's what we should do. There are no utopias. We are in a fallen world. We as Christian economists are always trying to figure out how do we change and rearrange these systems that align them more with God's intent for our lives. Well, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist, where our slogan is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.